The big alien ships came from the dark space between stars like hungry wolves looking for sheep. The Vorthak were 8 feet tall, with red scales and yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. They had sharp teeth and claws that could cut through steel. Their ships were black and shaped like giant spears that could destroy entire planets. Commander Tae-jin stood on his ship bridge looking at the small blue world called Earth. His soldiers called him the Blood Hunter because he never left any enemies alive. He had destroyed 47 worlds in 20 years. Each time was the same. The aliens would see his ships and try to fight. Then they would beg for mercy. Then they would all die screaming. This new world looked easy. The humans sent out weak radio signals that showed they had no real weapons. Their biggest ships were tiny metal boxes that could barely leave their own planet. The whole conquest would take maybe 3 days if the humans were really stupid. Maybe a week if they tried to hide in their little holes. Tae-jin felt his hunting instincts getting stronger as he thought about all the fear he would create. The Vorthak loved fear more than food. They would land on a planet and start killing slowly so everyone could see what was coming. The screaming and crying made them feel powerful. It proved they were the best hunters in the galaxy. But something felt different about this blue world. The other planets always had lots of radio chatter when the Vorthak ships appeared. People screaming and crying and begging for help. Earth was getting quiet. The radio signals were stopping one by one like someone was turning off lights in a big house. Deep under the ocean on Earth, Admiral Park. So Young was reading reports about the alien ships. She knew human weapons would not work against Vorthak technology. Their ships had shields that could stop nuclear bombs. Their soldiers wore armor that made them almost impossible to kill. The only hope was to try something the aliens would never expect Park. So Young walked down a long metal hallway to a special room where they kept their most dangerous soldier. Lieutenant Commander Kim Dong-ho had done things that made other soldiers have nightmares. He was not tall or big, but something in his eyes made people step away when he walked past. Other soldiers fought for their country. Kim fought because he liked killing bad things. The room was small and cold. Kim sat on a metal chair reading reports about Vorthak, hunting methods. He had been studying how they thought and how they moved. He knew that predators always had weaknesses. They got too confident. They made the same mistakes over and over. They never expected their prey to fight back. Hard Kim looked up when Admiral Park entered the room. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were already planning something terrible for the aliens. Park sat down across from him and put a file on the table. The file had pictures of destroyed worlds and dead aliens who had tried to fight the Vorthak. This is what they do to every world they find. Park said, they land in the cities and start hunting people for fun. They think humans will run and hide like all the others, but they never met humans who know how to hunt. Then Baek Kim opened the file and looked at the pictures for a long time. He studied how the Vorthak moved in groups, how they set up their camps, how they thought about their prey. His brain was already working out ways to turn their own hunting methods against them. The Vorthak think they are apex predators, Kim said quietly. But they never hunted anything that knew how to hunt them back. They are about to learn what real predators look like. Park watched Kim study the alien files and felt a cold feeling in her stomach. She had seen Kim work before. When he got that look in his eyes, bad things happened to bad people. But these were not just bad people. These were alien monsters with technology from space that could destroy planets. Alien ships were getting closer to Earth. Every hour they came nearer to the blue world where humans lived and worked and raised families. The Vorthak were making plans to land in the biggest cities first. They would kill the leaders and make everyone else watch. Then they would start the real hunting, Commander. Tae-jin felt excited as Earth grew bigger on his screen. He could already taste the fear that would fill the air when his soldiers started their work. The humans would learn what it meant to be prey. The Vorthak would teach them slowly and carefully, so the lesson would last as long as possible. But in the cold room under the ocean, Kim Dong-ho was making different plans. He was thinking about how to make the hunters become the hunted. He was planning to show the Vorthak what happened when real predators decided something needed to die. His plans were quiet and careful and terrible. The alien ships crossed into Earth orbit and started sending down smaller ships full of soldiers. The Vorthak were ready to begin their favorite game of hunting and killing. Everything was going exactly like it always did. The aliens were confident and excited and ready to create fear. They did not know that something much worse than them was already waiting in the empty cities, something that had studied them for weeks, something that knew exactly how they thought and moved, something that was going to teach them the difference between being a hunter and being prey. The real hunt was about to begin. The Vorthak landing ships came down like burning meteors in the morning sky. They landed in Seoul, Tokyo, Manila, and other big cities exactly like they always did. The aliens expected to see millions of people running and screaming, but the streets were empty. The buildings were dark. The whole cities looked like everyone had just disappeared. Commander Tae-jin felt confused as he watched the landing reports. His soldiers were trained to hunt scared prey that ran away and hid, but there was nobody to hunt. The cities were like empty shells with no life inside. This had never happened before on any world they conquered. Warrior Kyung-soo led the first hunting pack through the empty streets of Seoul. He was young and eager to prove himself by killing many humans. His pack moved carefully through the abandoned city, looking for signs of where the prey was hiding. They found cars stopped in the middle of streets with doors open, like people had just vanished. The subway tunnels under the city seemed like perfect hiding places for scared humans. The Vorthak loved hunting in dark spaces because their night vision was better than most species. Kyung-soo led his warriors down into the tunnels expecting to find hundreds of people cowering in the darkness. But the tunnels were wrong somehow. They were too quiet and too empty. There were sounds that did not belong. Soft footsteps that stopped when they listened. Metal scraping on concrete that came from everywhere and nowhere. Kyung-soo felt something he had never felt before. He felt like he was being watched by something dangerous. The last transmission from Kyung-soo was strange sounds and then static. When the recovery team found his body 3 hours later, it was arranged in a way that sent a clear message to anyone who understood hunting. Someone had killed a Vorthak warrior using only human weapons and human methods. The human had left a small metal tag next to the body. It had writing that said Kim and some numbers. The tag was placed carefully where the aliens would find it, like someone wanted them to know who had done this. Kyung-soo had been killed by something that was not afraid of Vorthak claws and armor. More hunting packs went missing over the next 2 days. Each time, the recovery teams found bodies that had been arranged like warnings. The human killer was using Vorthak psychology against them. He knew that predators got scared when they found their packmates dead in strange ways. Kim Dong-ho moved through the empty city like a ghost made of death. He had spent weeks learning how Vorthak minds worked. They were predators, but they were lazy predators. They expected their prey to be weak and scared. They never planned for prey that could fight back better than they could. The turning point came in the old shopping district where Kim decided to let them see him. A patrol of 5 Vorthak warriors was searching through empty stores when Kim walked out into the open street. He was smaller than any of them and had only human weapons, but something about him made them hesitate. The Vorthak charged because that was what predators did when they saw prey. But Kim was not prey. Kim was something much worse. He moved like liquid death flowing around their claws and weapons. In 30 seconds, 4 warriors were dead, and the 5th warrior, Jae-min, was running away, screaming into his radio. Jae-min broadcast panic messages about the impossible human who moved too fast and hit too hard. His terror-filled voice told every Vorthak in the city that their perfect hunting machines had met something that hunted them better. For the first time in their species' history, the Vorthak felt real fear. Commander Tai Jin listened to the panic reports and felt his confidence cracking like ice in spring. His warriors were the best killers in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds without ever losing a single battle, but this one human was making them afraid of shadows and empty buildings. The human left messages written in Vorthak language on the walls of buildings. Messages that said where he would be and when he would kill again. Messages that showed he understood how their minds worked better than they did. The psychological warfare was breaking down their military discipline. Kim had turned the entire city into his hunting ground. He moved through sewers and tunnels and rooftops like the city belonged to him. He set traps that used Vorthak instincts against them. When they heard sounds that might be humans hiding, they found death waiting instead of prey. The Vorthak tried to adapt by moving in larger groups, but Kim adapted faster. He would kill one member of a patrol and let the others find the body. He would leave tracks. That led to empty buildings where more traps waited. He was teaching them to be afraid of everything in their environment. By the end of the second day, half the Vorthak forces on Earth were dead or too scared to leave their landing ships. Commander Taejin realized that they were not hunting humans anymore. The human was hunting them. They had become prey in their own hunting ground. The reports from other cities were just as bad. The single human seemed to be everywhere at once, killing Vorthak warriors and leaving their bodies as warnings. The psychological impact was worse than losing battles. It was destroying the foundation of what made them feel superior. Commander Taejin made the hardest decision of his military career. He ordered all remaining warriors to abandon the surface and return to the ships. They were retreating from a single enemy on a primitive world. This had never happened in Vorthak history, but as their ships lifted off, Kim Dong-ho sent them a final message, broadcast on all their frequencies. The message was simple and terrifying. It said in perfect Vorthak language, "This was just one human. There are billions more like me. You picked the wrong species to hunt." The Vorthak left Earth orbit carrying something they had never carried before. They carried fear. Commander Taejin sat in his command chair trying to understand what had happened on the blue world. His species had been perfect predators for thousands of years. They knew how to hunt anything that lived, but one small human had turned them into frightened prey running back to space. The reports from Earth kept getting worse as more survivors told their stories. Warriors with decades of hunting experience described a human who seemed to know exactly what they would do before they did it. He had used their own predatory instincts to lead them into traps that should not have been possible. Warrior Seo Jin told about finding his packmates arranged like they were still on patrol until he got close enough to see they were all dead. The human had posed the bodies to look normal from a distance. It was psychological warfare designed to make them jump at every shadow and doubt everything they saw. The human had somehow learned to write in Vorthak script and left messages that cut deeper than any weapon. The messages were not threats. They were promises. Specific times and places where he would be waiting. Taunts about their inability to catch one small prey animal. Challenges that made their warrior pride demand response. But responding to the challenges meant walking into carefully prepared killing zones. The human had studied every building and tunnel and rooftop in his territory. He knew exactly where Vorthak warriors would go and what they would do when they got there. Every instinct they trusted had become a weakness he could exploit. Kim Dong-ho had disappeared from Earth 3 days after the Vorthak retreat, but his psychological impact was spreading through their empire like a plague. Other conquered species were hearing whispers about humans who fought back, about Vorthak warriors running in terror, about prey that had become predators. The whispers started rebellions on 17 different worlds as alien populations realized their conquerors were not invincible. The Vorthak military machine was designed to inspire fear, but now they were the ones who were afraid. Their authority was crumbling as fast as their confidence. Tae-Jin received orders to return to Earth with a full battle fleet of 20 ships and 2,000 warriors. The High Command refused to believe that one human could defeat their entire invasion force. They thought the first attack had been a fluke that could be fixed with overwhelming numbers, but when the second fleet arrived at Earth, they found something impossible waiting for them. The human had somehow acquired Vorthak technology and learned to use it better than they could. Their own weapons and ships were being turned against them by prey that should not have understood alien science. Kim had spent weeks studying every piece of Vorthak equipment left behind after their retreat. He understood their technology well enough to modify it and improve it. His human brain found weaknesses in alien designs that the aliens themselves had never noticed. The space battle that followed was unlike anything in Vorthak military history. Their own weapons were being used against them with tactical knowledge that seemed impossible. One human in a single modified ship was outfighting an entire battle fleet using strategies no Vorthak commander could understand. Ship after ship fell to weapons fire that came from impossible angles at impossible times. Kim moved through space like he owned it, striking from behind asteroids and space debris that should not have provided enough cover. His ship seemed to be everywhere at once. Commander Tae-Jin watched his fleet being destroyed by tactics that made no sense. The human was not just winning, he was teaching them that everything they knew about space combat was wrong. He was showing them that their technology was inferior to what humans could do with the same tools. The final insult came when Kim disabled Tae-Jin's flagship instead of destroying it. He could have killed everyone aboard, but instead he sent a message that appeared on every screen in perfect Vorthak text. The message said, "You are not predators. You are scavengers. I am sending you home to tell others what real predators look like, Tae." Jin limped back to Vorthak space with only 3 ships left out of 20. The survivors carried stories that would haunt their species for generations, stories about a human who had taken their best warriors and their best technology and made them both look like toys in the hands of a real killer. The Vorthak High Command convened emergency sessions to discuss the Earth problem, but found themselves paralyzed by reports that contradicted everything they believed about themselves. Some insisted the humans had developed impossible new weapons. Others claimed it was still just one warrior with abilities that defied understanding. The truth was worse than either explanation. The human was not using superweapons or magic powers. He was simply better at being a predator than they were, more patient, more ruthless, more willing to do whatever was necessary to eliminate threats to his pack. For a species that had built their entire identity around being the ultimate hunters, this revelation was more devastating than any military defeat. They had met something that made them obsolete. Something that proved they were never apex predators at all. Kim Dong-ho had shown them what apex predators really looked like. And now every Vorthak in the galaxy would spend their remaining lives knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, the real hunters were waiting. The surviving Vorthak warriors who escaped from Earth brought back stories that spread through their empire like fire through dry grass. They told about a human who moved like death itself, who understood alien psychology better than aliens understood, themselves who had turned the galaxy's most feared predators into frightened prey animals. The official military reports were locked away in classified files, but rumors traveled faster than official channels. Vorthak warriors who had seen their pack, mates arranged like hunting trophies, could not forget what they had witnessed. They spoke in whispers about human eyes that glowed with hunting instincts, older and deadlier than anything in Vorthak history. Admiral Park, so young, monitored alien. Communications from her command center under the ocean. She watched the Vorthak Empire begin to tear itself apart from the inside as fear replaced confidence in their military forces. Other conquered species heard the whispers and began to hope. For the first time in decades, On 47 different worlds, rebellions sparked as alien populations realized their Vorthak masters were not invincible anymore. The psychological impact of one human's actions was creating a galaxy-wide revolution against predators who had ruled through terror for centuries. The fear that had held the Empire together was turning into rage, but Kim Dong-ho was not finished with his mission. He had studied captured Vorthak technology until he understood it better than the aliens who built it. Using their own ships and weapons, he began infiltrating their supply lines throughout the solar system. Each attack was calculated for maximum terror. Effect Vorthak supply ships would be found drifting in space, with their crews alive but unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but stare with eyes full of horror. The ship's navigation computers would be reprogrammed to display messages in perfect Vorthak script warning about human vengeance coming for everyone who had ever threatened Earth. The messages were works of psychological art designed by someone who understood exactly how predator minds worked. They described in detail what would happen to every Vorthak who had participated in attacks on innocent worlds. They promised that human hunters would find them no matter where they hid in the galaxy. Kim had learned that the Vorthak kept detailed records of every world they had conquered, every species they had exterminated, every life they had taken for sport. He used their own databases to create personal messages for specific warriors, telling them exactly which innocent beings they had killed and exactly how they would pay for those crimes. The Vorthak High Command called emergency sessions to address what they now called the human problem, but found themselves unable to agree on any solution. Some wanted to launch a full-scale invasion of Earth, with every ship in their fleet. Others wanted to abandon the entire sector of space and pretend humans did not exist. Commander Tae-jin sat in the High Command chamber as the only officer who had survived multiple encounters with Kim Dong-ho. His testimony was required for every strategy session, but what he had to say made the situation worse instead of better. The human was not using advanced technology or supernatural abilities. He was simply better at being a predator than they were, more patient in planning attacks, more ruthless in executing them, more willing to do whatever was necessary to protect his territory and his species. The Vorthak had built their reputation on being the ultimate hunters, but they had never hunted anything that could hunt them back. The reports from Kim indicated that he had somehow learned to pilot Vorthak ships better than Vorthak pilots, to use Vorthak weapons more effectively than Vorthak warriors, to understand Vorthak psychology more completely than Vorthak leaders understood themselves. It was impossible, but the evidence kept growing. Intelligence reports showed that Kim was no longer operating alone. Other humans had begun learning his methods, spreading his techniques throughout Earth military forces. What had started as one warrior defending his homeworld was becoming a species-wide transformation into something the galaxy had never seen. The Vorthak tried to respond by increasing security around their important installations, but security measures designed to keep out normal enemies were useless against someone who thought like they did, but better. Every defensive position they created, Kim turned into a trap that caught them instead of protecting them. Supply lines that had operated safely for decades began failing as human sabotage spread throughout Vorthak. Space. Weapons depots exploded. Communication centers went dark. Transport ships disappeared without trace. The empire that had conquered 47 worlds was being dismantled, piece by tactics they could not counter. The psychological warfare was working exactly as Kim had planned. The Vorthak were spending more time looking over their shoulders than looking forward. Their military efficiency dropped as fear replaced confidence in their abilities. Warriors who had terrorized entire species were now afraid to leave their bases without overwhelming backup. Most devastating of all was the realization that they had brought this on themselves by attacking Earth. The humans had not sought out conflict with the Vorthak Empire. They had simply defended themselves when attacked, but their method of defense was so effective that it was destroying their attackers completely. The Vorthak began to understand that they had made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had awakened something that made them look like harmless prey animals. By comparison, they had learned what it felt like to be hunted by real predators, and that knowledge was tearing their civilization apart. Kim Dong-ho had spent months studying every piece of Vorthak technology he could capture from their failed invasion of Earth. He learned their ship systems, their weapon designs, their communication methods, their navigation computers until he understood their technology better than most Vorthak engineers understood it themselves. When Kim disappeared from Earth aboard a stolen Vorthak stealth ship, Admiral Park, So Young knew he had taken the war directly into enemy territory. His mission had evolved. Beyond defending Earth, he was now conducting a one-man campaign of terror against an entire galactic empire that had made the mistake of threatening human civilization. The Vorthak homeworld of Krell-Tar had never experienced warfare on its own surface. For 3 centuries, it had been the secure center of an expanding empire where warrior nobles planned conquests, while their young trained by hunting captured prey species in elaborate game preserves that covered entire continents. When Kim arrived in the Krell-Tar system, he did not attack the military bases or government centers. Instead, he went after the thing that made the Vorthak feel superior to other species. He targeted their training facilities where young warriors learned to hunt and kill prey species from across the galaxy. The warrior academies were massive complexes where Vorthak youth spent years learning to be perfect predators. They hunted captured aliens in controlled environments designed to teach them that they were apex predators destined to rule over lesser species. The training was supposed to be perfectly safe for the Vorthak students. Kim infiltrated the academies like a disease spreading through a healthy body. He moved through the training grounds, turning the hunting exercises into lessons about human capabilities. Young Vorthak warriors found their instructors dead in positions that demonstrated advanced human combat techniques that should not have existed. The next generation of Vorthak predators was being taught that humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous, something to be avoided rather than hunted. The psychological impact on young minds was even more effective than killing adult warriors because it shaped how they would think for the rest of their lives. But Kim was not satisfied with just destroying their training programs. He wanted to attack the foundation of Vorthak superiority, the thing that made them believe they were entitled to hunt other species. He targeted the High Command's personal hunting preserve, where the Empire's most elite warriors kept exotic captured aliens for sport. The hunting preserve was a massive complex that covered an entire moon where captured prey species were kept in artificial environments designed to make them easy to hunt. The Vorthak elite would bring guests to demonstrate their superiority by killing helpless beings from across the galaxy. Kim did not just infiltrate the preserve, he transformed it completely. Instead of killing the Vorthak hunters, he freed all their captive prey species and taught them how to fight back using human tactics. The preserve became a reverse hunting ground where former victims learned to hunt their former captors. The freed prisoners came from dozens of different species, but they all shared one thing in common. They had been captured and tortured by the Vorthak for entertainment. Kim taught them to work together using their different abilities to create coordinated hunting packs that the Vorthak could not counter. When rescue teams finally arrived at the preserve, they found an ecosystem that had been completely transformed. Dozens of former prey species had learned to use Vorthak weapons and tactics against their captors. The bodies they found showed evidence of coordinated attacks, advanced trap construction, and psychological warfare techniques. The preserve had become a permanent symbol of what human influence could achieve. Former victims had learned to become predators themselves, using methods that the Vorthak could not understand or counter. The reversal was complete and devastating to Vorthak. Psychology, Kim left detailed records of what he had done. broadcast on all Vorthak communication frequencies, so every warrior in the Empire would know exactly how their most secure facility had been compromised. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe from human retaliation for crimes against innocent species. The psychological impact spread through Vorthak space like a plague. Their elite warriors, the ones who were supposed to be examples of perfect predatory skill, had been turned into prey by their own former victims. The foundation of their superiority complex was crumbling under the weight of evidence that they were not apex predators. Military units throughout the Empire began reporting decreased effectiveness as warriors lost confidence in their abilities. The fear that humans might be anywhere, might have already infiltrated any facility, might have already turned any situation into a trap, was paralyzing their decision-making processes. Kim continued his campaign by targeting key infrastructure throughout Vorthak space, but always with the same psychological twist. He would leave facilities operational, but modify them to serve human purposes. Weapons factories would continue producing arms, but the weapons would be programmed to malfunction when used against Earth. The Vorthak found themselves in the impossible position of being afraid of their own equipment, of doubting their own intelligence reports, of questioning whether any facility or ship or weapon could be trusted. Everything they thought they knew about their technological superiority was being systematically demolished. Most terrifying of all was the realization that Kim was doing this alone. One human warrior was dismantling an empire that had conquered 47 worlds simply by being better at predatory warfare than an entire species of predators. The implications were too frightening for most Vorthak minds to accept. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, the Vorthak Empire existed only in name. Their military fleets had been recalled to defensive positions around core worlds, abandoning conquered territories that were now in open rebellion. The mere possibility that other humans might be coming had paralyzed a civilization that once swept across star systems without hesitation. The rebellions were spreading faster than the Vorthak could contain them. 47 different species that had been conquered over the centuries were rising up simultaneously, using tactics that seemed to have been learned from human military doctrine. The Empire was collapsing under the weight of its own former victims. Commander Tai Jin now wore scars from 17. Separate encounters with Kim Dong-ho had become the Empire's leading expert on human warfare. His testimony was required for every strategic planning session, but what he had to say offered no hope for victory against an enemy that seemed to understand them better than they understood themselves. Kim had evolved beyond being just a single warrior into something that approached a force of nature. He appeared wherever Vorthak influence remained strong, always alone, but somehow always exactly where he needed to be to cause maximum psychological damage. His presence had become a form of warfare that operated on a galactic scale. Intelligence reports suggested that Kim was training other humans in his methods, spreading his techniques throughout Earth military forces. What had begun as one man's defense of his homeworld was transforming into a species-wide evolution toward something the galaxy had never seen before. The Vorthak tried everything they could think of to stop him. They set traps, using bait they thought he could not resist. They ambushed him with overwhelming numbers. They attacked targets they thought he would have to defend. But every strategy failed because Kim understood their thinking better than they did. The final confrontation came when Kim announced on all Vorthak communication frequencies that he would be waiting in Emperor Vorth AK's palace at sunset. He gave the exact time and location and invited every warrior in the system to come and face him in open combat. Every available Vorthak military unit converged on the capital city, determined to end the human threat through overwhelming firepower. Thousands of warriors surrounded the palace complex, carrying enough weapons to destroy a small city. They were confident that even Kim Dong-ho could not survive such odds. What they found when they entered the palace throne room was a single human sitting calmly in the emperor's chair, surrounded by evidence of what had happened to their supreme leader, Emperor Vorth. Ak had not been killed quickly. The scene made it clear that Kim had spent considerable time demonstrating exactly what humans were capable of when they decided something needed to be eliminated. The Emperor's final moments had been recorded and transmitted simultaneously to every Vorthak world in the Empire, ensuring that the entire species would understand their new place in the galactic hierarchy. The message was unmistakable. Humans were not just defending themselves. They were establishing dominance. Kim stood slowly as thousands of heavily armed warriors surrounded him and spoke in perfect Vorthak language that he had somehow learned during his months of warfare against them. Your species hunted others because you thought you were apex predators, he said calmly. You were wrong. Humans are apex predators. He continued, looking directly at Commander Tae Jin as he spoke. You are now an endangered species, and whether your people survive depends entirely on your behavior from this point forward. I am giving you one chance to prove you can learn from your mistakes. He walked toward the palace exit, moving through thousands of armed warriors who parted before him like water. None of them tried to stop him or raise their weapons against him. The psychological dominance was so complete that an entire army had become unable to act against a single enemy. Kim paused at the palace entrance and delivered his final message to the Vorthak Empire. You will withdraw from all conquered territories immediately. You will pay reparations to every species you have wronged. You will submit to human oversight of your military activities. You will never again hunt sentient beings for sport. If you refuse these terms, he said quietly, then humans will hunt your species to extinction, just like you have done to so many others. The choice is yours, but remember that we are much better at hunting than you ever were. The Vorthak Empire officially surrendered to Earth 3 days later, offering complete withdrawal from all conquered territories and reparations to every species they had wronged. The surrender documents were signed by Commander Tae Jin, as no higher-ranking official had survived their encounters with humanity.